Let me be direct with you from the outset, because what is unfolding in the Strait of Hormuz right now demands absolute directness. What we are witnessing is not a conventional naval buildup. It is not a show of force designed for deterrence. What we are witnessing is the systematic deployment of asymmetric warfare doctrine that the United States Navy has spent 40 years trying to prepare for and still cannot effectively counter. I am looking at satellite imagery that has been circulating among Western naval intelligence analysts for the past 96 hours. And I need you to understand what it shows because the implications are staggering. What it shows is not aircraft carriers. It is not destroyers or guided missile cruisers. What it shows is approximately 200 small, fast attack craft dispersed across 17 coastal positions along the Iranian coastline from Bandar Abbas to Jask. These are not pleasure boats. These are purpose-built naval assets equipped with anti-ship missiles, torpedoes, and mine-laying capabilities organized in what military analysts call wolf pack formation. In the next 20 minutes, I am going to walk you through exactly why this represents the most significant shift in Gulf naval strategy in a generation, why the Pentagon has no effective countermeasure despite decades of preparation, and why what happens in these narrow waters over the next several weeks will determine global energy prices for the next 5 years. This is where geopolitical theory meets operational reality. Subscribe now if you have not already, because what we are about to cover is being actively analyzed by American military strategists at CENTCOM headquarters in Tampa right now. This is not speculation. This is doctrine. Let's start with the geography, because everything that follows depends on understanding the physical constraints of the Strait of Hormuz. The strait at its narrowest point is 21 nautical miles wide. To put that in perspective, that is roughly the distance from downtown Manhattan to the northern edge of the Bronx. Two shipping lanes, each 2 miles wide, run through this choke point in opposite directions. Between them sits a 2-mile buffer zone. That means the actual navigable space for the massive oil tankers that carry 20% of the world's petroleum is staggeringly narrow. The average water depth in the shipping lanes is approximately 50 meters. For context, American Arleigh Burke-class destroyers draw 6.9 meters. The ultra-large crude carriers, the supertankers that dominate this route, draw 24 meters when fully loaded. They are navigating with less than 30 meters of water beneath their keels, moving at 12 to 14 knots, requiring 3 nautical miles to come to a complete stop. These vessels are not agile. They are not maneuverable. They are floating infrastructure, utterly vulnerable in confined waters. According to the International Energy Agency, approximately 17 million barrels of oil per day transit the Strait of Hormuz. That represents roughly 30% of all seaborne traded crude oil. Bloomberg has calculated that a 30-day closure of the strait would remove approximately 500 million barrels from global markets, triggering what energy economists describe as the most severe supply shock since the 1970s Arab oil embargo. Insurance underwriters at Lloyd's of London have already increased war risk premiums for vessels transiting the strait by 400% in the past 6 weeks. The market is pricing in conflict. Now, subscribe if you are watching this and realizing you are not getting this level of analysis anywhere else. The mainstream coverage focuses on whether America and Iran will go to war. That is the wrong question. The right question is whether Iran can make the strait economically non-viable without firing a single shot. And the answer is yes. Announcement number 1, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy has deployed what Western intelligence estimates as between 180 and 220 fast attack craft into wolfpack formations along the Iranian coastline. And this deployment matters more than anything else happening in this theater right now, because it represents the operationalization of a doctrine the IRGC has been refining since 1988. These are not improvised speedboats. The vessels in question are primarily Paycap class and Zulfikar class fast attack craft. The PACAP class measures approximately 15 meters in length, carries a crew of 8, and is armed with 2 C-704 anti-ship cruise missiles with a range of 35 kilometers. The Zulfikar class is slightly larger at 17 meters, carries 12 personnel, and mounts 4 Nasr-1 anti-ship missiles. Both classes are capable of sustained speeds exceeding 50 knots in calm seas. For comparison, an American destroyer's maximum speed is approximately 32 knots. Commander Joshua Frey of the United States Naval War College published an analysis in the Proceedings of the U.S. Naval Institute in March of this year, stating, and I am quoting him directly here, that asymmetric swarm tactics in confined waters represent the most challenging threat environment for conventional naval forces operating in the 21st century. He specifically cited the IRGC Navy's small boat doctrine as a case study in effective asymmetric strategy. The IRGC currently operates an estimated 340 of these fast attack craft distributed across 4 naval districts. 200 deployed simultaneously is not their entire fleet. It is exactly 2/3 of their operational capability, which suggests strategic reserve and rotation capacity. That number matters because it indicates this is not a temporary show of force. This is a sustained operational posture. The Wolfpack formation itself is critical to understanding the threat. Unlike conventional naval formations, which concentrate firepower, Wolfpack doctrine disperses assets across a wide operational area, making them extremely difficult to track and target. Individual craft operate in groups of 3 to 5 vessels, maintaining communications through encrypted burst transmissions, capable of coordinating attacks from multiple vectors simultaneously. American destroyers are designed to engage multiple airborne threats using Aegis combat systems. They are not optimized for tracking dozens of small, fast-moving surface contacts in cluttered coastal waters. Received. That is announcement number 1. Announcement number 2, and this is the element Western media is almost completely ignoring. The IRGC has positioned these vessels specifically at 17 coastal facilities that double as civilian infrastructure. This is not coincidence. This is calculated legal and political strategy. According to reporting by Jane's Defense Weekly and confirmed by satellite analysis from the Center for Strategic and International Studies, the dispersal sites include commercial fishing ports, oil terminal facilities, and civilian marinas along a 300-kilometer stretch of coastline. The legal implications are profound. Under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, military vessels in proximity to civilian infrastructure complicate targeting protocols for any opposing force. An American strike on vessels docked at a civilian port facility risks violating international maritime law and triggering diplomatic consequences with European allies already skeptical of American military action in the region. Stay with me because this is where the strategy becomes truly sophisticated and where Iran's asymmetric approach reveals its full dimension. The positioning is not just about legal cover. It is about operational resilience. Distributed assets cannot be destroyed in a single coordinated strike. American military doctrine since Desert Storm has emphasized overwhelming initial strikes to achieve rapid dominance. That doctrine assumes concentrated targets. 200 speedboats dispersed across 17 locations along 300 kilometers of coastline cannot be eliminated quickly, and every hour they remain operational is an hour of strategic uncertainty for commercial shipping. Reuters reported on April 14th that insurance underwriters have informed major shipping companies that war risk coverage for Strait of Hormuz transits now requires premiums equivalent to 12% of cargo value. For a standard VLCC carrying 2 million barrels of crude oil valued at $80 per barrel, that represents $19 million in insurance costs for a single transit. The economics become prohibitive almost immediately. Shipping companies do not need actual conflict. The credible threat alone is sufficient to reroute or halt traffic. Announcement number 3, and this is the development that almost nobody is connecting correctly. The IRGC has synchronized this naval deployment with the activation of coastal anti-ship missile batteries at a minimum of 9 locations along the same coastline. These are not the speedboats. These are fixed installations housing long-range cruise missiles. The systems in question are primarily the Gator and Gadir missile systems. The Gator has a stated range of 300 kilometers. The Gadir, which is a shore-based variant of the Naval Nazar missile, has a range of 35 kilometers, but is specifically designed for terminal phase attacks on large vessels in confined waters. Defense Security Asia reported in late March that Iran has deployed an estimated 50 to 70 launchers across these 9 sites, representing a combined magazine depth of approximately 200 missiles. Think carefully about what this represents. A commercial tanker entering the strait from the Gulf of Oman is immediately within range of shore-based missiles the moment it crosses into the strait. It remains within range for approximately 2 hours as it transits to the Gulf proper. During that 2-hour window, it is simultaneously exposed to Wolfpack fast attack craft capable of launching their own anti-ship missiles and to fixed coastal batteries with overlapping fields of fire. This is not a defensive posture. This is an anti-access area denial strategy executed at a level of sophistication that rivals anything NATO has modeled. Captain Richard Butler, formerly of the Royal Navy and now a senior fellow at the International Institute for Strategic Studies, stated in a recent interview with The Telegraph that the layered threat environment in the Strait currently exceeds the complexity of Cold War-era Soviet defenses in the Baltic approaches. He specifically noted that no NATO navy has successfully exercised against this combination of threats in confined waters. This is not a drill scenario. This is operational reality. Received. That is announcement number 3. Now, let's talk about what is really happening behind the headlines, because there are 2 stories playing out simultaneously, and the Western media is only covering one of them. The mainstream narrative is focused on whether Iran will close the strait. That is a distraction. The real story is that Iran does not need to close the strait to achieve strategic effect. They simply need to make it economically and operationally untenable. The United States Fifth Fleet, headquartered in Bahrain, currently maintains a standing presence of approximately 1 guided missile destroyer, 2 to 3 coastal patrol craft, and rotational support from carrier strike groups that are not permanently stationed in the Gulf. During periods of heightened tension, the Navy surges additional assets into theater. But here is the critical constraint. American destroyers are not designed for sustained operations in the confined, shallow waters of the Gulf. They are blue water vessels optimized for open ocean warfare. Their sensor systems struggle with the acoustic clutter and radar reflections created by hundreds of civilian vessels, offshore oil platforms, and coastal geography. Admiral William Fallon, former commander of United States Central Command, acknowledged in congressional testimony in 2007, and this is a matter of public record, that the operational environment in the Arabian Gulf presents unique challenges for which conventional naval superiority provides limited advantage. Albur en d'entran surgis. He was specifically referring to asymmetric swarm tactics. That was 19 years ago. The problem has not been solved. It has intensified. The Pentagon responded to this deployment by announcing the forward deployment of additional Patriot missile batteries to allied Gulf states and the extension of the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group's deployment in the region. This has not notably changed Iran's calculus. Why? Because carrier strike groups operate in the Gulf of Oman, not inside the strait itself. The strategic depth does not exist. The Lincoln can launch airstrikes against Iranian coastal facilities, but that escalates the confrontation into full-spectrum war, which is precisely what both the Pentagon and the White House have stated they want to avoid. Think carefully about what this represents. When the United States deploys additional military assets in response to an Iranian move, and our staters, and those assets do not alter Iran's operational freedom of action, that is not deterrence. That is demonstration of constraint. The optics suggest American power. The reality reveals American limitation. If you own a business with logistics exposure, if you trade in energy markets, if you manage supply chain operations for manufacturing, what is happening in the Strait of Hormuz is not a foreign policy story. It is a cost structure story. Brent crude futures have increased by $18 per barrel since mid-March. Freight rates for Gulf exports have increased by 40%. These costs are already embedded in the prices you are paying for diesel, heating oil, jet fuel, and petrochemical derivatives. This is not a distant geopolitical crisis. This is already in your operational budget. This pattern has repeated throughout history, and every time it repeats, the outcome is the same. Let me take you back to 480 BC to the Battle of Thermopylae. 300 Spartans held a narrow pass against a Persian army estimated at between 100,000 and 300,000 soldiers. The Persians had numerical superiority, logistical depth, and tactical flexibility. The Spartans had geography. For 3 days, the narrow pass neutralized every Persian advantage. The confined space made numbers irrelevant. The Persians could not deploy their cavalry. They could not bring their full infantry to bear. They could not maneuver. The Strait of Hormuz is a maritime Thermopylae. The United States Navy has 11 aircraft carriers, 71 destroyers, and the most advanced naval aviation capability in human history. None of that matters in a waterway 21 miles wide where fast attack craft can launch missiles from 12 kilometers away and withdraw into territorial waters before retaliation can be coordinated. The confined space neutralizes American advantages in exactly the same way the pass at Thermopylae neutralized Persian advantages. The Spartans eventually lost at Thermopylae, but they held long enough to demonstrate that superior numbers do not guarantee victory in confined terrain. Iran does not need to win a war with the United States Navy. They need to hold the strait long enough to impose economic costs that exceed American tolerance for sustained confrontation. And every day this deployment continues, that calculus tilts further in Iran's favor. So where does this leave us? Let me give you 3 clear paths forward, because there is no honest middle ground here, and pretending otherwise is intellectual cowardice. Path 1, diplomatic resolution. The United States and Iran negotiate a framework that addresses sanctions relief in exchange for verifiable limits on Iranian military activity in the strait. This requires the current administration to reverse course on maximum pressure doctrine, which it has shown zero willingness to do. European allies would support this approach. China and Russia would endorse it immediately. The political cost domestically in the United States would be significant. The probability of this path in the next 90 days is less than 20%. Path 2, strategic acceptance. The United States acknowledges that it cannot militarily resolve the strait situation without unacceptable escalation and adapts its energy security strategy accordingly. This means accelerating Western Hemisphere energy independence, increasing strategic petroleum reserve releases, and coordinating with allies to diversify supply routes. This is the rational choice. It is also politically unacceptable because it requires admitting limited American power in a region where the United States has claimed dominance since 1945. Probability within 6 months, 30 to 40%. Path 3, military escalation. The United States conducts limited strikes against Iranian coastal facilities and naval assets, attempting to degrade Iran's operational capability without triggering full-scale war. Iran responds with exactly the kind of distributed swarm attacks that American systems struggle to counter, potentially hitting commercial shipping, Gulf state oil infrastructure, or forward-deployed U.S. assets. Insurance markets price strait transits as uninsurable. Oil reaches $150 per barrel. Regional war becomes nearly inevitable. This is the most dangerous path, and unfortunately, given current rhetoric from both Tehran and Washington, the probability is approaching 45%. I think we are closer to path 3 than the headlines suggest, and that should terrify anyone who understands energy markets and Middle Eastern conflict dynamics. The deployment we are discussing today is not a bluff. The IRGC does not move 200 fast attack craft into operational formation for symbolic purposes. They have made a decision. The question now is whether Washington understands that decision and whether it has the strategic flexibility to avoid walking into an escalation trap that Iran has spent 4 decades designing. Here are the questions I want you to take away from this analysis. First, at what point do insurance costs make strait transits economically impossible regardless of military developments? Second, if commercial shipping halts voluntarily due to risk assessment rather than Iranian action, who bears responsibility for the resulting energy crisis? Third, what is the American strategic objective in the Gulf if conventional military superiority cannot guarantee freedom of navigation in confined waters? Tell me in the comments what you think the administration does next. Tell me if you believe diplomatic off-ramps still exist or whether we are already committed to a confrontation neither side can walk away from without losing face. Tell me what metrics you are watching to assess escalation risk. We will keep tracking every development in the Strait, in Tehran, in Washington, and across global energy markets. That is what this analysis does every single day. Subscribe now. Share this breakdown with everyone in your network who is trying to understand why gasoline prices are climbing and why Middle East tensions are not just foreign policy abstractions, but direct economic threats. Turn on notifications so you do not miss the next update, because what happens in the Strait of Hormuz over the next 30 days will determine whether we are looking at a managed crisis or the beginning of a regional war with global economic consequences. We will see you in the next analysis.